really interesting considering everything special about Tony Stark came from daddy's money and daddy's research. I'm just saying, like, well, hello there. I have a lot to say. As you can tell by my title, this video is going to be very controversial. But in all seriousness though, I'm not doing this video to attack any of the actors or any of the directors or any of the storytellers who work on Marvel movies. I'm not attacking Robert Downey Jr. I'm not attacking Marvel Studios because I love Marvel, okay? I am like the definition of a Marvel fangirl, but just because I love Marvel doesn't mean I love all of Marvel's characters. And I just so happen to despise the one character that everyone accredits to starting up the MCU. I'm simply here to spread my opinion, and I hope that you guys will listen to it. Oh my god, this video is gonna be so long. Also, if you couldn't tell, I am moderately sick. Also, I realize that I can get really passionate about subjects like this. Don't take that as me like just being like, oh well, I just hate him, so that's it. Like, just listen to me, please. Also, throughout this video, I'm going to be talking specifically about Tony Stark within the MCU, not Tony Stark in the comic books, because this video would just go on forever and ever and ever. I will say that most of my animosity with him comes from the movies Age of Ultron and Civil War. So obviously there are the well-known things, like he was an arms dealer or weapons manufacturer, and he sold weapons. He sleeps around a lot and doesn't really respect women. A lot of Tony Stark's villains, a majority of Tony Stark's villains, are people he's worked with in the past, people who he arrogantly created, basically. He's controlling, he likes to be the leader, the center of attention, stuff like that. That is not the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today in this video. I mean, it's part of it, but that is just the tip of the iceberg if you ask me. Let's get into this movie by movie, shall we? In the first Iron Man, and basically in all of the Iron Mans, almost all of the adversities that Tony has to face, he created by his actions. For example, in the first Iron Man, he was kidnapped by terrorists to help them make weapons because he himself was in that area testing out weapons he made. If you think about it, if Tony Stark was just like a guy who had access to guns and he was like a gang leader, and he was there testing out his guns, and then another gang leader came up and kidnapped him to try to steal his guns, would you guys bat an eyelash about that? Would you say that that was not Tony's fault? No, you would completely blame Tony. Oh, just because he was a weapons dealer doesn't mean he should have been kidnapped. I'm not saying he should have been kidnapped, but if he had not been doing the things that he was doing, he wouldn't have been in that situation, period. And if you want a better example, Iron Man 2. Because in the first Iron Man, he told everyone who he was, the government started going after him and being like, you need to give up your weapons to us so that we can use them to police other people around the world. If he had not told people he was Iron Man, nobody would be telling him how to use his weapons and who to use it for. But because he was arrogant and because he continuously wants the credit for every little tiny hero thing that he does, he told the world that he was Iron Man, and therefore a bunch of things started coming back onto him. Because Tony's poor actions continuously negatively affect the future, all he really does is fight for himself. It causes for like this back and forth of him doing something bad and then him fighting for himself to get out of that bad situation, and that ends up hurting a bunch of other people. And I'm gonna get back to that. All of this morale switching affects his decisions within Infinity War too. All Tony really does now is pretend to fight for good because he's stuck in that loop. But in reality, he's fighting for the good side because his moral switches whenever it benefits him the most. He never has a solid, like, oh, this is good, this is bad, or this is wrong, this is right. When things aren't looking good for him, he switches back to the other side. I'm gonna get back to that too. So let's just briefly brush on the Avengers. Oh god. I realized that during the Avengers, none of the team really knew each other that well, and so that caused a lot of friction between them, and they were all fighting and yelling at each other, and they weren't a solid unit until like the very end, the end fight in New York. However, just the immaturity that Tony had and the arrogance that he displayed throughout the entire Avengers movie, it was just dialed to 11 versus the rest of the team. He continuously tried to fight Captain America. He annoyingly kept trying to get Banner to Hulk out, even though they were in a situation where if he hulked out, that would cause the whole ship to fall. He fought Thor. He was just like doing a bunch of things that caused friction between the team members. And there's a point where Tony and Cap are arguing where you can see that Cap tells him, you only fight for yourself, and that gets to him because he knows that it's the truth. So he tries to fight back against what Cap said by saying, well, oh, the only thing special about you is that you're a science experiment or whatever. The stuff that's special about Cap is his morale. He sticks to good no matter the cost. And Tony doesn't do that. And you can see that. Cap called it out. Also, saying that everything special about Steve Rogers came from a bottle is really, really interesting, considering everything special about Tony Stark came from Daddy's money and Daddy's research. Let's talk about Age of Ultron now. Well, first of all, this is the big obvious one, of course, because it's like the whole plot of Age of Ultron, but Tony made Ultron. Like, he created something that forced the Avengers to come back together. Do you know how terrible that is? And this is kind of going back to what I was saying about the Iron Man villains. Like, he creates his own villains, and in this sense, it's just a literal sense. He built this super bot that attacked hundreds of thousands of people. And then towards the end of Age of Ultron, he just like created another one. He, as a scientist, as a genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, thought in his big brain of brains, oh, I created this robot in the beginning of this movie, and that didn't go very well at all. Let me make a new one. Who does that? Who says, I made an evil Superbot who wants to kill everybody on Earth because he sees us as flawed? So let me make another one to try to reverse that. I don't know, I'm not a genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, but I think that's bad. Honestly, for me, I don't really care that he created Ultron. I mean, yeah, it's a super terrible thing that he did. However, my problem with Tony in Age of Ultron comes from the twins. A lot of people forget about big details of Age of Ultron because it's written off as like not a great movie to some people. So during the time that the twins were helping Ultron, they told him a story about why they don't trust Tony Stark when they were younger. Now, mind you, the twins in Age of Ultron were only 19 years old, so they were still young. They're my age in Age of Ultron. Their city was bombed using weapons that Tony Stark had created and manufactured out. Their parents were killed, and they, as little children, were stuck under their bed through all this rubble, all this damage from all these bombs, and they had to face a bomb that was literally like 5 feet away from them. And on the side of that bomb, the only thing they could see was the name Stark. They're under this bed, and they stay there for 2 days. 2 whole days. Can you imagine, just for a second, like, somebody bombs where you live, your parents are dead, you have nowhere to go, and all you can see is a bomb that hasn't yet detonated staring back at you for 2 whole days. That's all you can see. You don't eat, you don't sleep for the most part because you're scared. If that happened to me, I would not trust Tony Stark either. You cannot get me to communicate with or even like be cordial with a person who made bombs that almost killed me and killed my family when I was just a young child. Can you imagine the trauma that you have to live with after going through something like that? And people just ignore it. But that was Tony Stark's fault. This is a really important story to remember because it shows you how terrible the fact that he was an arms dealer in the past was. It shows you a glimpse of all of the people that he negatively affected by selling those weapons when he did. And yes, I know he stopped selling the weapons, he destroyed them, he became Iron Man because he wanted to help people. I don't care. He still did those things that affected thousands upon thousands of people, and you can't ignore that just because he like made a cool suit and was like, I'm gonna help people now sometimes. And yet, after all of that happened to them, they still, after seeing that Ultron was pure evil, they helped Tony defeat him. They helped the person who traumatized them as little children defeat an evil that he himself created and he himself should be in charge of alone. They put aside all of the trauma that Tony Stark gave to them and helped him for the greater good of the world. And because of helping him, Wanda ended up losing her only family she had left. Remember that though, because I'm gonna get back to this when we talk about Civil War. I'm gonna segue this into Civil War because this is where it gets hypocritical on Tony's part. First of all, in the second Iron Man, as I said earlier, Tony Stark was distasteful with the government. He said that basically like they have no rights to his weapons, and if they take his suits, they take him, and that's taking away his freedom. He was so adamant about the fact that he is Iron Man and they cannot control Iron Man. Yet, when he gets guilt-tripped about Ultron in Civil War, then he wants to turn around all of a sudden and be like, oh, you guys, we should all turn our freedoms into the government because, you know, we're so bad. No, you're bad. You were the one who created Ultron, which created the Sokovia Accords in the first place. Since his ego was hurt, he turned around and forced the entire Avengers to give up their freedoms to the governments of the world. Just because you make terrible choices on your own and are now facing the repercussions for it, doesn't mean that I have to sign some accords to keep you in check. The Sokovia Accords wouldn't have happened if he hadn't created Ultron in the first place. So the fact that he tries to force the other Avengers to sign along with him just shows how selfish and simple-minded he is. He can never take full responsibility for something by himself. He always has to drag the other heroes into it. Well, so since I created Ultron, but you guys helped me fight him and people died because of that, like, we need to be put in check. This is another thing. He can never see that he's wrong. So he completely ignored Captain America telling him time and time and again, like, there's something wrong. And then it turned out that Cap was right and that Bucky was framed. And then directly after Iron Man found out that Bucky was framed, when he saw a video, as soon as Iron Man saw that Bucky might have killed his parents, he went straight into attack mode. If you are a genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, and you just found out that someone was framed for a bombing which killed a king of a whole country, someone tells you that they killed your parents too, but you know that they just got framed for something else, are you gonna immediately be like, oh, they killed my parents, let's go? No, you're gonna question it. I questioned it. Either way, there's no way he could have seen who was doing what in that little tiny security video from 1992, okay? So there's no way he could have seen Bucky choke out his mom. Like, there's no, he was like, oh, I don't care, he killed my mommy. You didn't see that. If he just got framed for killing someone else, a bunch of people, world leaders, you think someone won't frame him for killing your parents? He can never let go of anything within himself, but he expects everyone to forgive him for all of the terrible things that he's done over the years. So, like I said earlier, getting back to the twins, getting back to Wanda, how come a 19-year-old little girl who Tony Stark traumatized on multiple occasions now can forgive him enough to help him stop someone who's going to destroy the entire Earth, but he can't forgive Bucky enough to stop someone who literally just bombed the UN? Like, Wanda's supposed to let go of all of her trauma. She has to put all of that aside. But when it comes to someone who killed Tony's parents while they were brainwashed, it's go time. Like, we're gonna fight. But when it comes to you and what happens to you, no, you get to fight people. You get to throw a temper tantrum and fight someone who you called your friend. Fight someone who literally just got framed, and even if he didn't get framed, he's been brainwashed his entire life, basically. You get to throw a temper tantrum and fight them. You, like, deliberately sold weapons to people who killed her family members, and you deliberately made Ultron, who killed her brother. She can't be mad at you, and in fact, you lock her away in a room and you force her to be kept under watch because she's dangerous? Make it make sense, child. Please make it make sense. That sounds like selfishness to me. And then there's the fact that he just treats Wanda like she's not even a person. Like, she's not a person with her own traumas and with her own guilt. And she can't control herself, even though she was literally trying to help people at the beginning of Civil War, which is something that he should have honored. Like, he shouldn't have locked her away just because people got hurt when she was trying to save them. Nobody locked him away. This is an Infinity War side note, but if you were mad at Star-Lord during Infinity War, you cannot tell me that you were not mad at Tony Stark for what he did in Civil War. They basically did the same exact thing. There was something bigger at stake, but instead of focusing on the task at hand, they got upset because their loved ones were taken away from them by the person who they're not supposed to be fighting at the moment because there's something bigger at stake. But instead of focusing on what the task at hand, they attacked the wrong person at the wrong time. That's why when everybody's like, oh my gosh, Star-Lord ruined the universe, Star-Lord's to blame for half of the universe getting snapped out of existence. No! Tony did the exact same thing in Civil War, and you guys were like, oh well, Tony Stark's right, you know, Bucky killed his parents. At the cost of the Avengers? At the cost of the Avengers. There's also just the fact that Tony Stark, while recruiting Spider-Man, lied to him in order for him to be on his team. Spider-Man basically lays it out to Tony. He doesn't know that this is the argument that the Avengers are having, but he tells Tony, like, if you're a hero, if you can do all these things, and something bad is happening, and you don't stop it, that's on you. And that's basically Cap's entire stance throughout Civil War. But Tony's like, okay, well, Cap's wrong, he's bad right now, so we just gotta attack him, okay? Just attack him, and aim for the legs, Like, you can't withhold information from someone if you want them to be on your side. Like, you have to tell, it doesn't matter that Spider-Man's a 15-year-old kid. If you want to use his abilities, you have to tell him exactly what's going on. You can't just withhold information so that he'll be on your side so that you can have another person to fight against Cap.
Look, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
And then after withholding information from him, and then getting him to fight some of the Avengers, he just drops them off at home and it's like, okay, bye. He uses Spider-Man and everybody's like, oh my gosh, their father-son relationship is so cute. What kind of healthy father-son relationship is a person using you for your abilities? Poor little Spider-Man is like, oh, I'm a hero now. I helped Tony Stark. And Tony Stark's like, let me get this kid out of here, bruh. Also, you can call me an SJW, whatever you want to call me, but like, the way Tony Stark treats women it's not it, sis. You can say whatever, fine, he's changed in the past 9-10 years from the first 3 Iron Mans when he was just sleeping around and saying misogynistic things. But literally in Spider-Man Homecoming and in Civil War, he hits on Aunt May creepily, and then he gets engaged at the end of that movie. Like, if I were Pepper, I know she doesn't know about that, at least about the Aunt May thing, but still, if I were Pepper, I would be like, I don't care how much money you have, it is not worth it. He literally creepily hits on the aunt of someone he's using. Going back to his morale switching, he literally forces Doctor Strange to go to Titan so that he can fight Thanos, because he thinks that if he fights Thanos on his terrain, if he defeats Thanos, that will get rid of the trauma that he still has from New York. He's not thinking about whether this will be safer for other people or whether this will actually work or not. And since he's ignorant towards the Infinity Stones and space in general, he has no way of knowing whether or not they can actually defeat Thanos. He's just thinking in his head, I've had PTSD from this guy's actions all the way back 6 years from New York. So if I get him now, I'll be good. Not thinking like, oh, Spider-Man's here, like we need to take him back home, because he sent him back home, but then when Spider-Man came back, he was just like, okay, I guess we're going to Titan. He's not thinking about the fact that Doctor Strange told him multiple times that the Time Stone, under no circumstances, can be taken to Thanos. All he's thinking about is, I'm gonna go fight Thanos. I'm gonna kill Thanos, and then this will be over. He never makes decisions that involve the greater good. He makes decisions based off of what makes him feel like, oh, this is okay. And that's shown throughout all of the movies. He makes decisions based on his own personal gain. He made Ultron so that he himself would not have to fight more big evils such as Thanos and his Chitauri army like he had to do in New York. He made Ultron so that he doesn't have to go through that trauma again, and that ended up backfiring in his face. And when it backfired in his face, he made all the rest of the Avengers fight with him to defeat Ultron, which caused the Sokovia Accords, which then, when the Sokovia Accords were being inflicted onto the Avengers, he turned against the Avengers again. He felt guilty about Sokovia after that mother told him that she blames him for it, so then he switched his morale again against the Avengers and for the governments of the world. In the second Iron Man, he was against the governments of the world because he wanted all the credit for his technology that he used in his own way to help people. Like, he switches up depending on how it suits him at the moment. He never sticks on one moral path. I honestly could go on forever and ever about this, and I might even make a part 2 on this video because there's so much more that I feel like I could have touched on based on every single thing that Tony has done within the MCU. But overall, just in closing, I think the moral of my video is to not omit people of their flaws simply because they're your favorite character or because you like the person. And this applies to anything, but especially Tony Stark, because I see a lot of people crediting him for being the godfather of the MCU, crediting him for being the leader of the Avengers when it's Captain America, crediting him for stopping Ultron even though he created him in the first place. I just feel like there are a lot of things that Tony Stark has done incredibly wrong, and people overlook those things because he was the first movie in the MCU and because he is a likable character based on his quips. I know he's in space right now all alone and that's sad or whatever, and you want him to be safe. A lot of things in the MCU would not have happened had Tony Stark not been arrogant, had Tony Stark not been a hypocrite, had Tony Stark not been selfish. A lot of bad things would not have happened had Tony Stark been less of, you know, himself. There's just a lot of things that I'm not gonna get into. I really should make a part 2 to this. He's not a very nice person, and I don't think that anybody doesn't know that, but I think a lot of people ignore it because it's part of what makes him so funny and part of what makes his quips, you know, cool, because it's like, oh my gosh, he's so sarcastic, look at him, haha, he's so quirky, he's so fun. I hate it. My last moral of this video is don't be like Tony Stark. Just learn something from the way that he treats people rather than idolizing him for it. That's a better way to say don't be like Tony Stark, isn't it? Isn't it? Don't be like Tony Stark. I'm gonna get so much hate for this video. Bye guys.